wanted to do a larger, more expanded version of this. You can hear the rumbling in the background. There's a shit ton of supercars here during Concourse weekend in the Monterey Peninsula, and everybody's got a fucking supercar these days, and they're annoying. And then you have all these YouTubers who are out there encouraging them, and with these little smiles on their face because they're wanting to do TikTok videos and YouTube videos based around the capitalistic ridiculousness of this supercar culture. And there is no culture, and that's the whole point here. So I wanted to do a more in-depth view on this because it is deserving of a much more penetrating look, and it obviously is our existence that we take very seriously. But it gets down to the whole isms, schisms things, right? Where you identify yourself in a particular way because of your experiences. But when you are released from experience, and you're the only one who can release yourself from those experiences, you have this come to the pulpit, come to the cross, come to Jesus sort of moment, as it's called. This daunting realization that who you are and what you are has nothing to do with the experiences here. And the best way to do this is oddly, and I do think that James Cameron was looking at this along with Ridley Scott, right? Where you begin to look at the phenomenon of this avatar, right? Particularly how it blends and cross-correlates to Prometheus, right? So obviously Alien and Prometheus aren't getting into this sort of soul venture like James Cameron does. Or James Cameron's Forward to the Jesus Family Tomb. That's a really interesting one, and very well articulated and amazingly written, actually. The book itself sucked. But to read the Forward to the Jesus Family Tomb and then to look at Avatar, that's a mind fuck in itself. Because you really get into this idea that, so there's the ideology that people who consider themselves in the club, that they consider themselves above society, above other people, above human suffering, and then they're classified in this sort of Jew, Khazarian mafia, Pharisee framework. And like I've been watching Cliff High for several months, if not past a year. And people who really haven't followed him or don't think in depth about what his true message is, he's not a nice old man. He's not nice old Cliffy High. What he is somebody who's extremely violent and very angry and uses his words assaultively as a weapon because he wants to be in the club. He's no different than Trump, and that's why he aligns with Trump. He's trying to break the door down, but he's doing it in a way where he wants to, damn it, he's going to keep being a little child, a little army brat, just like Trump. I mean, he didn't serve any military time, but he went to a military school. He came from a military thought process where he really believes, and this is the thing, no matter who you are, so this gets into, so Egypt, Kemet, it gets into the fact of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It gets into the fact that you will not, no matter how rich you think you are on this planet, and there's so much scripture and so many pieces of literature that speak about this, all the way down to the story of Osiris, right, or Horus, and Isis, and when you look at it, particularly I think it's displayed well through the Pantheon, and even more so in Babylonian lore. When you get into Anu and Tiamat and Kingu and so forth, and Marduk, right? Not to name Marduk fourth, he's thrice great, right? Like Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus, because there's a correlation there between this same central sort of character that Hercules or Heracles is also heavily associated with. And it does. Like Jason Reese Georgiani is so much better at this, more articulate, obviously more read and taught, in the academic setting, along with Amon Hillman, right? So, like this fundamentalist Christian ideology, people get swept into fighting against it, but they're still in the paradigm, they're still in the game. So in other words, you can't try and carry yourself along, no matter how blessed or how favored you think that you were, right? You are just an aspect of the construct, and you will have to lose yourself. So you have these people who are kicking and screaming, going, I don't want to lose this self. I don't want to lose this memory. I want to remember who I am. And then there's the fear that you're just going to get thrown right back through the karma cycle. You'll forget yourself, and you're going to pop back out as something that's extremely antithetical, but not in a juxtaposed position. The universe is very interesting and tricky on that, right? What movie did I see last night that played with this concept? I can't even remember. It was on Hulu. The Monkey. I suggest watching it. The Monkey, yeah, it was about this monkey. So it plays around with karma, but it also kind of gets into this final destination, or preternatural or predestination, almost like a Hinduistic. It's deep. Like when you really look at the conceptualization of the monkey, and then you're like, what if this phenomenon took place almost like a gravity well or at a central location, a point in time location, and we were to turn it into an object? How would that look? So the monkey like manifests itself and remanifests itself as something that is like Thanos, right? It is inevitable, right? Has to be. It's like it's more prevalent. So when you're looking at principles, you look deeper at this, right? Like what's the point of principles if you can't understand them? And it's the machine will be murdered. Like the monkey murders people. Like, and it almost seems like this callous or careless thing where it's like, wow, you just and it wouldn't pick out certain people and murder certain people for specific purposes. So what it was trying to relay in a much deeper sense is that when you try to display moral justice or the human moral condition, and then you think that the ultimate karma doesn't take into consideration and is lower than your human ideation, right? That you are taking yourself far too seriously. Then to go into and to say, oh, well, we're just nuance, and we just sort of come into being, and everything's deterministic, Sapolsky sort of thing, right? Robert Sapolsky. So, and I almost say Bukowski, and then I go, well, what's the fucking difference, right? So it's like Charles Bukowski. It's like life is crude, the Bukowski aspect. Conrad Zuse, Alan Turing, life is predetermined, but life doesn't have to stay on any fucking track, and it can skip tracks, and it can make a lot of sense to us at certain times, and we love that, we relish that, and we set our little human behaviors and the holidays that we think last forever, right? Let's not mention Crystal Knock, right? Let's not mention Arnie's daddy. Let's not mention the brown shirts in 1938. Okay, Arnie, and where modern bodybuilding got its funding from. Wow, ooh, that hurts. And how it all hails back in this tapestry, and it has to, and that it has to be utterly transparent. And then when you begin to look at it, anything, Even if you're studying baseball stats or football stats, right? Which I'm completely not into. But when you start to look at the number system and how it lays out averages, the numbers are undeniable. You could take something where you're chasing a ball around a field and never have one person that is a highly intellectual, high IQ individual that ever occupies that field, and still the ontology is going to be heavily at work. So what does that tell you? So what we start to look at in this context is, again, we look at the ontology. The deepest somebody could go while still remaining extremely surface. I would say uncertainty principle Heisenberg, but I would say, because it just comes to mind, obviously. But when you look at Dasein and Heidegger, and how really I think Heidegger goes to the utter fringe, he goes to the event horizon of the black hole, and he says this is as close as you can get when you're trying to transpose beyond human endeavor. Right? He really is taking Nietzsche's work and going, okay, we're looking at Nietzsche's flat time. We've actually done a full rotation about it. Here we are. This is as fucking close as you can get. You're about to lose yourself. Right? If you've gone this far, there's an exit sign over there that says if you keep circling into this toilet bowl, there's not going to be a you anymore that exists. And that's the whole point to it, is that you get to this point of arrivement where you forget yourself. Right? So it still seems so abstract, and it's weird how you can visualize this, understand what you're saying, listen to this, and still be so surface dwelling, right? Because I feel like I'm really getting so close to this to where some people would understand what I'm saying and many won't. So losing the form, losing the geometry, the cremation of care, the wicker man, burning the self, but at the same time, you're not vying for a return. So in our minds, you're just dead. You're gone, right? From the Freemason's mind is you couldn't handle it. You didn't know what the fuck you were doing. You only knew your duty as an identity. So in other words, the Master Key System coaches you on how to be a good Boy Scout, how to be a good man, how to take on an identity. But what it's really saying on a much deeper level is that this is all bullshit. That taking on the identity, that it's telling you, if you see this and you read this and you give it quality and it has any sort of quality to you, right? And you see qualia, the quality of life, the quality of human experience, your phenomenon, your noumenon, the Welt. If those things mean anything to you, then you haven't let go. And we're going to ensure that you stay on track. And so I heard JJ Vance bring this up the other night, and it was something that in a podcast or so back, can't remember the exact one, but it's in the last few days, and he said something to the effect of, I completely lost my train of thought, but he said something to the effect, so I'm staying on track here, so basically that our existence doesn't really have any sort of rhyme or reason or quality, and I was getting into qualia and human experience and so forth. I don't remember what he said on that, to be honest with you, and the things that he says are kind of fringe and swirl around the toilet bowl, right? But the whole point of the thing is that I don't know. I'm going to take a sip of coffee and not just stop talking, but take a little breather. I've been eating a lot of sugar, and my metabolism's just kind of going wild, and it's a little bit hot in here. I need to work out. Take a little breather for a second instead of just stopping this. It's weird how it just comes on you when you're trying to think about something that's so fucking pivotal, so important, right? So, looking at the self, releasing the self, not dying, not vying for death, going toward this Masonic ritualization of having your name called out, going back through the Ouroboros, back through samsara, back through karma, and to be then fixated to the structure where you're invited back into the club. And I remember what I was going to say now is that each and every generation, we have to choose. So he was talking about the Society of the Cincinnati, and wondering, he was postulating about, you would think, so he's talking about himself, and he was talking about how he had these Freemasons in his family, and then the person that he was interviewing and talking to was saying something under the same context where he was like, yeah, I had family, directly in my family, I had Freemasons, and it's like, you'd think that they'd bring it up, or you'd think that they would, they would, for instance, he was talking about how his grandfather, he was surprised to find out that he wasn't like a huge high level Mason or whatever, but he was a Mason nonetheless. He was an active Mason, And then something else that Alfalfa, the little rascal, who was it, Carl Fitzer or Switzer. I was kind of doing a little diving and research, and I think I found his son, because there is a guy who goes under, I think it's a Lance Switzer, but that guy Carl Switzer, Alfalfa, he was joined up with the Masons. I don't think he was active or that he even got through the first 3 degrees, nor did he take it seriously. But a friend of his, Roy Rogers, talked him into joining up, and he joined up, and he has the compass in the square on his gravestone. Fuck, who knows? Maybe the Masons paid for it, right? So he's entered. He's an entered apprentice. So he, in my opinion, the way this all works is he's going to be spit back out of another vagina, and he's going to be going through the same fucking thing and starting out having to make the choice, but having a recollection that he was affiliated in a past life. So each and every life you have to choose on your own, through your own volition, without any, they can introduce themselves to you. They can talk about Freemasonry. They can be either really pivotal in your life or not so much, but they're not. Recruitment is not something that they do, right? Because then you are involving yourself with karma. Then you are trying to change the order, right? So even if a Freemason would really like to see you join up, they really feel your power. They really know that you have these metachlorians and you could be the next fucking Darth Vader, whatever you want to look at it, right? Or the next Qui-Gon Jinn, because it's all the same shit, right? You're still alive. In other words, you're still playing with forces, and you're still valuing this corporeal carnal. Not a temporal, because we're talking about Jedi here or whatnot, right? But in time space, you're taking up space, and you are of the carbon-based existence, right? You're still trapped in that karma or dharma, right? So what we're talking about is the leveling up and the inevitable release from the karma, dharma, dukkha, shit and vinegar, spit and vinegar, but shit and vinegar aspect to this whole thing, that you're supposed to be mentored to work beyond this. And it's not an ascetic sort of, Buddhists bury themselves under the ground and breathe through a straw and kill themselves off and die type of thing and go through this utter suffering, and this is how they're leveling up. Like, do you understand that in their mindset, and this is the irony, is that, and this gets into self-immolation and so forth too, is that, do you realize that you think it's like, you're gonna have all these virgins in this so-called, heaven with Islam, right? Do you realize that you acting selfless, you burning the self, you looking like you've been victorious and championed over the carnal, that all you're wanting to do is get spit out of another vagina and come back into the world with more power. You're projecting toward another life that may never happen, right? So you're self-assuming, right? You're self-assuming. And this is what people don't get, is that their souls are extremely aware, and there's an energy awareness, a consciousness, right? Like every event on the microtubule level, you're still trying to just achieve power. That's your end all goal. It's to end up in a better place. So you're basically killing your life off right now to end up in a better life, trapped back in the same fucking game. What we're talking about is the complete and total release of the corporeal or the carnal, a refuting of the corporeal and the carnal, but a process through, right? And this is where people just completely get lost. So in these initiate programs, you're not getting proselytized. Like, you know how it is that, you need to have this come to Jesus, and how, everyone from fucking Jehovah's Witnesses to Christians to, depending on what they think they're getting out of it and how their religion is stacked up. If they think there's only 144,000 chosen people, yeah, they're out there fucking recruiting and trying to compete with your ass. But the whole idea is to do it in such a way, through a seduction, right? Where they're dancing and moving and trying to get you, mesmerize you, and they figure if they recruit you, they're going to be looked on more favorably by God, right? And J.J. Vance brought up something good the other night, where it's like, how fucking, like with these Jews at the Talmud and something. Well, that wasn't J.J. Vance, that was Cliff High, in a more recent interview a few days ago, where he was like, how stupid do you think your God is? Like, would you really want to serve a God that could be so easily tricked by killing some fucking deer and setting up these antlers and pretending that you are serving this God? And then it's like these weird ass Talmudic rituals. It's fucking bizarre, man. Weirdos. But the whole thing is that they think that they're thinking like God, right? And they're missing the entire point. And then their rituals are based around missing the point. But the whole point is that there's an abstraction, that things seem so heavily abstract from our point of view that you would say the physics. So everything, everywhere, all at once. I think that's what it was called, where they do all these absurd acts, and then it's basically to release themselves from a mimetic codified timeline where they no longer make sense. And so they're sort of like, for a momentary aspect, they're sent into this sort of like the zodiacal spinning of probability of where they might belong in another universe because they're doing such asinine things, right? Where they'll like suddenly pick some gum up from the bottom of a fucking desk, put it on their shoe and lick it 12 times, and then turn around 3 times and knock their head and say chew, 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 right? Like it's just this asinine ritual, but taking it very seriously, right? Where they're going through this sort of asinine ritual, right? To get free. But the whole idea behind people is that they want to gain power and control. So this gets back to The Monkey, that movie that I watched the other night that was on Hulu. They want to get back to the place where they have, or perceivably to a place that they might have never been, but they feel like they've been there before, where it's like this point of contention, this point of power, where they have the power over other people. They're trying to take a roundabout way to elitism, right? That's what's really happening here with every religion, every person, every practice, everything that's done. And there's this idea also that further gets into a boldness where you're just coming face to face with it and you're saying, fuck this, I'm not doing any of these stupid rituals. I'm looking right at you like the eye of providence. And nothing here binds me. I don't relish in or take seriously any of this human experience, and I want to break free. And then it looks upon you and it's like, well, why aren't you free, right? So this gets into a lot of other areas, but it goes through karma, where you look at people who are just daredevils and you're going, how in the fuck is this person wired this way, right? That's the soul's effect on the body. That's a dopamine as opposed to an adrenal effect, right? To where these people who are big risk takers actually get a high. They get a dopamine high off of this. And this is the effect from the body to this, from the soul to the body, right? To release oneself from the constructs of the physics that are based around fear. And what we find is, wow, people are capable of doing some crazy ass shit. Like they're capable of doing things that seem like just things that you couldn't even fathom, like you couldn't skate 70 miles an hour on a longboard down that fucking ravine or that hill, and they show you, yeah, you can. Pushing human endeavor further and further. And so most people are performing based on experience, and they're going, like the 500-pound bench press, like nobody could get past that. You had these huge buff people that were so strong for so long. But it was kind of synonymous with like your 18-inch arm, right? Where you didn't see anybody that had over 18-inch arms for the longest time, unless they're fat as fuck, right? You didn't have anybody who could bench over 500 pounds. There was just a lot of gym talk that somebody could, but unofficially, right? But once everybody was doing it, the general consensus just sort of followed along, and you saw people doing it just left and right? Now you can go to almost any gym, even fucking Planet Fitness or 24-hour fitness. Every now and then you're just gonna see some motherfucker who could, with 400, 500 pounds, even 600 pounds stacked up, and they're doing it. They're working out that way, and they're not even like majorly juicing necessarily, So, yeah. So anyway, maybe I'll splice this up, throw it up, or whatever. But I got to use the restroom.